Welcome to another deep dive. Today, we're plunging into, well, a really foundational question, one that seems to be on a lot of minds. Is the U.S. Constitution still, fit for purpose in modern America? For this deep dive, we're working with a really compelling chapter called The Republic Must Be Reborn. It tackles this head-on, using insights from, surprisingly perhaps, Thomas Jefferson, often seen as one of America's most radical founding thinkers. So our mission here is to unpack why some argue the Constitution isn't really working effectively anymore, and how this voice from the past might actually offer a way forward.
Exactly. And the chapter argues, forcefully, that the problems we see in American democracy today, they aren't just about differing opinions or emotions. The argument presented is that they're systemic. They stem from the Constitution itself and how it's been interpreted over time.
Sure.
We're going to explore how these issues, which, recent presidencies have definitely highlighted, are actually argued to be sort of built into the foundation.
Okay, let's unpack this. The chapter, our source material here, it opens with a pretty stark assessment. It suggests recent presidencies have really shown the fragile architecture of American democracy. And it doesn't mince words. It claims the founding document, once revolutionary, is now ill-equipped for the demands of modern governance. It even says Americans are losing faith in their democracy.
And what's fascinating, as you said, is how it frames these failures. Not as something new, but as inherent, right? They're from the start, almost. And then it pivots to Jefferson. Not just Jefferson the founder, but Jefferson the radical thinker, someone who believed it was the people's right, even their duty, to reshape government when it stops serving them.
Yeah, and this is where, for me, it got really interesting. The chapter pulls out these Jefferson quotes that sound, well, they sound like they could have been written yesterday. First, there's his critique of treating the Constitution like it's untouchable. He said, some men look at constitutions with sanctimonious reverence and deem them like the Ark of the Covenant, too sacred to be touched. That hits home, doesn't it?
It really does. And
Yeah.
I mean, it makes you ask, why did Jefferson warn against that? His view was basically that the founders, they were wise, but they were human, limited by their time, their knowledge. And he felt pretty strongly that no single generation should bind all future ones. He even suggested the founders themselves would want reform if they saw things today. He said something like, 40 years of experience in government is worth a century book reading. They would say themselves were they to rise from the dead. Right. So for him, the real danger wasn't change, it was stagnation. They did not fear change, they feared stagnation.
He also had some sharp words about structural inequality, didn't he? The chapter highlights him calling inequality of representation in both houses of our legislature a Republican heresy. What does that really mean for us now? Especially when the chapter gives that example. Wyoming, 500,000 people having the same Senate power as California with almost 40 million.
Well, connecting the dots, Jefferson was arguing that real republicanism demands equal representation. It's fundamental. And his worry about that imbalance, it feels incredibly current, as the chapter points out. It's a direct parallel. And it's similar with his fears about the executive branch getting too powerful. He wrote in a letter something like, if some period be not fixed, his office, though nominally elective, will in fact be for life.
Wow.
Yeah. And you think about today, the chapter talks about an age of lifetime judicial appointments, executive orders with sweeping implications, and an imperial presidency. Jefferson's warning seems quite relevant.
And he wasn't just worried about the president or Congress. He warned about the courts, too, right? Judicial activism. The chapter quotes him. Our peculiar security is in the possession of a written constitution. Let us not make it a blank paper by construction. What did he mean? Make it a blank paper?
Essentially, he feared that if judges could just interpret it however they wanted, endlessly stretching the meaning,
Yeah.
then the Constitution would become meaningless, just words on parchment, a formality without force. He worried that too much elastic interpretation could hollow it out, even if the document itself still existed.
Right, keeping the form but losing the substance. So, okay, pulling this together, what does it mean for us? The chapter suggests his most revolutionary idea, maybe, is that each generation must be free to govern itself.
Right.
He declared, and these are strong words, no society can make a perpetual constitution or even a perpetual law. The earth belongs always to the living generation.
That line is powerful.
It is, and then even more starkly, the dead. But the dead have no rights. They are nothing. They alone, the living, have a right to direct what is the concern of themselves alone. I mean, that sounds pretty radical for a founding father.
Absolutely radical. And the chapter argues that what Jefferson was getting at here is a core democratic principle. It's the people alive now, Not the founders, not the courts, not tradition, who hold the moral right to decide how they are governed.
It's about the legitimacy residing with living.
Exactly. Self-governance, right here, right now.
And the chapter then connects Jefferson's warnings directly to today. It says, quite bluntly, what Jefferson merely warned of, we now witness. It describes the Constitution as having ossified, become rigid, inflexible. It argues it was never fully inclusive, rarely truly egalitarian, and that now the system favors the wealthy, protects entrenched power, and prevents timely change. And it gives examples we see debated all the time. Campaign finance laws that it calls toothless, stalled judicial reform, representation that feels distorted, leading to a public feeling unheard, unserved, and uninspired.
And the key insight drawn from Jefferson is that this state of affairs was never meant to be permanent. The Constitution, in this view, wasn't handed down as divine scripture. It was a political tool.
A tool.
Yeah. And tools, the chapter argues, must evolve or they break. The idea presented is that the founders gave us a starting point, a framework, expecting future generations to continue the work, to adapt it. Jefferson, especially, insisted on this need to adapt, rewrite, renew. Not because he disrespected the past, but out of fidelity to the living.
It's a provocative framing. This deep dive really brings out this idea that the Constitution, which started with the promise of being by the people, maybe hasn't fully achieved that yet, but perhaps it still can. The chapter concludes by putting the responsibility firmly on us today. It asserts the moral authority does not belong to parchment or monuments, but rests with the living majority.
It's a direct challenge. It says, the Republic will not save itself. We must reimagine it, rebuild it, rebirth it. So the Constitution isn't the final word on American democracy, according to this view. It's just the beginning.
So the final provocative thought for you listening to this deep dive is this. If the Constitution was just the beginning, and if, as the chapter urges, now we must write our own, what foundational principles would you prioritize? What would be essential for a system designed by and for the living generation right now?